All right, guys, and switching gears, we teased this before the break. Retail stores were beginning to open after months of being closed due to the coronavirus pandemic. Protests may have delayed the timelines, but many companies have recognized the need for change here in the U.S. And joining us now to discuss what this all means for the future of retail is Erin Sykes, retail expert, and Burt Flickinger, who is the Strategic Resource Group Managing Director. Thank you both for joining us here today. First, it's important to distinguish the difference between peaceful protesters and those who are separate from those protests and are rioting and looting retail businesses. So, Erin, let's start with you. What is the correct response from retail companies right now?
Well, what it comes down to retailers, the amount of insurance they carry. So the problem here is that the smaller the business, the less comprehensive their insurance is. So in dealing with riots in particular, not peaceful protests, but in rioting, we have larger companies are going to be able to get reimbursed for the looted merchandise or the windows that are broken, or maybe deal with incidents where people are injured on their property. Whereas the mom and pop stores, they don't carry that type of insurance. They pay the bare minimum, incredibly expensive. So even if those small businesses made it through the pandemic,
Yeah,
it's a whole other issue for them, and it's really concerning.
Erin, sorry to jump in there. We have a little bit of an audio issue with your audio, but just a hot second here because we're going to correct that. Bert, while we're doing that, many cities have put curfews in place due to the looting, which inhibit people from being out and about to shop. That impacts the business hours, that impacts the amount of revenue that they can bring in as they were starting to reopen. Does that have an effect here as well?
It does have an effect, but there's a bridge to the future on Reverend Calvin Butts III and Obsidian Baptist Church in Harlem on East 138th Street after Gavin Cato, young innocent 7-year-old, was tragically killed in 1989 in the Crown Heights arrest. Jack Futterman, Jim Donald from Pathmark got together with Reverend Butts, who's the pastor, 13,000 person congregation, and Adam Clayton Powell Jr.'s church. They started the Abyssinian Baptist Development Council, where there was revenue sharing between the retailers and the community, education, food, arts, affordable housing, development of people of color owned and operated properties, but most importantly, job creation. So the way Reverend Butts III worked is it provided jobs for people in the community, not just to stock shelves, but to be into management, to work in corporate offices as executive officers. And when Jack Futterman and Jim Donald left Pathmark, the private equity pirates gutted that model, and that revenue sharing model that was started by my great-grandfather, grandfather, and father, and taken to an even better and higher level by Reverend Calvin Butts and Messrs. Futterman and Donald, should be transformative for rebuilding retail across New York and every city, near urban, suburban, and rural area across the country, because there's nothing that the people in the communities in need and poverty and so much need for better education are getting currently from the retailers, even from Target, which has given 5% of its profits since George Draper Dayton founded the company 120 years ago, and Target allocates to the community. But you need a spiritual partner like Obsidian Baptist Church and Obsidian Baptist Development Council to really take it across the community, particularly with the leadership of the key spiritual leaders across denominations.
And so that's great insight. Erin, you started to get into this earlier on the insurance side. Realistically, what does this mean in terms of when some of these shops would be able to reopen? We were taking a look at some of the larger businesses, especially on Fifth Ave, in some of the more popular districts here in New York, but we're also thinking about the small businesses here as well. So realistic timelines.
The timelines are very to the size of the business. So you mentioned the larger Fifth Avenue stores, they will be able to make repairs. They will be able to somewhat, and it really depends on the retailer, get new merchandise. It was the beginning of a new season. Our seasons were a little bit disrupted. We had just had a lot of new merchandise arrivals. So whether or not there is quantity to get some more in is really determined and going to be retailer dependent. But with those smaller mom and pop shops that don't have the comprehensive insurance, barely made it through the pandemic, don't have huge cash reserve because cash will be continue to be paying. That's really the issue. They don't if they don't quickly, they can't make those repairs almost immediately. Their futures are very bleak.
And so, Burt, when we think about these retailers that have already faced a lot of hardship with the pandemic, many won't be opening their doors again. Will this exacerbate those closures? And additionally here, what does this mean for the jobs front, for the number of retail employees? 1 in 5, I believe it is, retail or employees are employed in the retail sector in the U.S. And so what does this mean for employment?
For retail employment, the previous 5 years, there was a proverbial retail ice age, and it's just been accelerated. And I do a lot of work with the labor unions, UFCW, RDWSU, Teamsters, Bakers, et cetera. And they've been really devastated because with no Federal Trade Commission oversight on predatory pricing and anti-competitive practices, potentially Amazon, Walmart, and others, a lot of the unionized employers that employ up to 500-600 people per store, full benefits, full pension plans, best wages in retail, they're hit hard. And your great question on opening, what we also really need to do is an outgrowth of the Abyssinian Baptist church model is what Jack Kemp and Congressman Charles Rangel did on a bipartisan basis in the House with Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, which is create economic empowerment zones with guaranteed financing from the government. To Erin's good point, help independently owned and operated first-generation Americans, people from the neighborhood, United Nations of Consumers with government loans, and really work with a spiritual base because, as you referenced, 20% of U.S. Employment is retail, and 50% or more of that employment, and in some cases close to 90%, been out of work.
All right, Erin Sykes, retail expert, and Burt Flickinger, who are the Burt is the Strategic Resource Group Managing Director, and Erin Sykes is retail expert, joining us here today.